Hi team, Nate here. Week 4 as we jump into Life Group Life and get you ready for next week. Thanks again for everything you're doing in helping our groups grow together and grow in their love and understanding for Jesus Christ. So appreciate you guys and want to do anything we can do to kind of help that happen. I've heard some good things. I don't know about you guys. We had a good first couple weeks. We were growing our group. We had everybody signed up for Sunday night big meal. One of our guys was going to do ribs for us, and everyone was going. And then throughout the afternoon, text after text after text, we were down to my wife and myself and the gentleman who was going to bring the ribs and one other gal that was going to come. And so we went from about 20 some odd, probably with kids and everything, down to the 3 of us or 4 of us. And so I recruited my dad because I actually had to take him down to San Francisco for some medical stuff later that evening. And but we had a lot of ribs and not a lot of other salad or other things that were supposed to be coming with the families that for one reason or another couldn't make it. So is life in the life group and community kind of world with some of the inconsistencies in that. But stay the course. Let's keep after it. Let's keep praying that God would use us in all kinds of ways. This week, we're in chapter 7 and 8 of Acts and excited about what Steve has prepared for us on Sunday and then what we're looking at with our life group questions as they've kind of come together. So it looks like a great opportunity to dive into some of that. We'll be looking at Stephen's persecution. We'll be looking at Philip going and finally this persecution shooting some of these believers out of Jerusalem, and then some of God's work beginning to take place in the cities around Jerusalem. And so fun to see the new work of God, but also with the sadness that comes with the persecution of God's people. So with your email, you'll see that there's an attachment on there to a video. I would love for you to watch that video, see if it might be appropriate for your group. I think it could be a great addition to what we're doing when you work through your questions and you get to the lookout section and really trying to see it. How does this truth still a part of the world that we live in today? And so that little video is a video that came out just recently as a part of the Voice of the Martyrs. It's a great little 6-minute video that brings you into a time when a pastor was persecuted, but he sort of lived out the Stephen kind of passion for forgiveness. And also you see God's goodness even in the midst of that horrific little situation. And so if that would be valuable for your group, I could see that being great. Just prep it before your group. Maybe even if you have an iPad or something like that, you could all huddle around that, or most people can pull up Vimeo or something like that on their TV, and it's pretty simple and straightforward. So enjoy that. Also with that, because of the events of this past week in Las Vegas, and because we're gathering and asking questions about who God is, there's a pretty good chance that will enter into your group discussion and really enter in around this idea of how could God allow this? Where is God in some of this tragedy? And obviously those are big answers, and yet we have answers for those as well. And so I've attached a couple of short readings that will give you just some direction in moving forward through those kinds of conversations. I encourage your group to not spend a lot of time trying to answer that question as much as coming alongside those that not only are being persecuted in our world, but are being attacked as a part of the tragic kind of outplay of evil in our world as well. And so that we would spend some time in our group specifically praying for them. And if your group's not comfortable praying as a whole, maybe you would just take that upon yourself and lead your group in a time of prayer for the families and those involved in the tragedy in Las Vegas this last week. So lean into that, look at those resources, they might be helpful. And again, we live in a world, we open up the text of the scriptures and we see clearly that sin has its way in us. And when I say in us, it's in us, it's in those around us, and that sin very specifically, according to the scriptures, leads to death. we see that Satan has a certain amount of rule in this world today, and Satan's goal is to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And so what Satan is trying to do is to move us into a place where we experience death. And then lastly, the world talks about, the scriptures talk about, the world, that the world's a little bit like a stream that our culture invites us to swim in at any certain time. And the scriptures say that if we just jump in the stream of our world, that it will lead us to a place of chaos and destruction. And there are times where we feel that in our own lives, in our own community, and then certainly outside of that when we look at the world and the way evil is taking root in so many ways. And so we pray against that. We live against that as individuals, as groups, and as the church. And so I hope that you will have some healthy discussion and a good time of prayer around that as we look at the persecution in Acts, but also as we look at the tragedies in our world as well this week. So enjoy that. Just in closing, I don't know if you ever have those situations where somebody will say something to you and you're kind of just engaged in conversation and you may not have a real close relationship with this person, but they say something and you think, I'm not sure I'm okay with that. I'm not sure that sits well with me, but you don't know how to respond or if you should respond. And so you just kind of condone their a bit awkward or outstanding maybe comment in the conversation. But it's when you drive away and you get a little bit of time to yourself and you think, okay, that's why that didn't feel right. A couple weeks ago, I was up at Cover's and I'm hanging out with our son Skylar at his little school event and mingling with other parents. And we're hanging out around the hay bales and entered into conversation with a couple that had gone to our church for years. And for whatever reason, they had left and they were doing some other things. And so I asked them if they'd found a church or where they were at and how that was going. And they kind of said, oh, we go to lots of different churches or we listen online or whatever. And I said, well, how's that working for you guys? And I know you have a bunch of kids. And so how's that work as far as community? I said, well, the reality is we don't have any support now. But, and this was, I felt like his little comment that got me, but what we do have is we have a lot of different pastors giving us their perspective on God's will for us. And I drove away thinking, okay, that just doesn't sit right with me. I'm not sure that's the pastor's perspective or role and responsibility. And I'm not sure that would be a positive of hearing from a number of pastors, what their will might be for me. I heard this yesterday I was in a conversation with a gal that was here in the office that needed some bills paid and is continuing to walk through a tough divorce. And so we're able to help her out in some pretty cool ways. And she was sort of being defensive for not being in church. And she said, oh, church, I do church all the time. And, church is me and Jesus and I pray in the morning, I pray all day long and I'm in the word. And I kind of just, okay, yeah, and didn't really think much of it, didn't push back. But what I thought afterwards is I thought, she has a wrong insight or a wrong application on what the church is. That the church isn't you and Jesus off somewhere. I mean, that's all good, and that ought to be a part of our relationship with God and who we are as people. But the church is you and I sitting together, encouraging, challenging, growing, loving, praying, grieving, asking questions, being together. And what she did might have been an excuse for not being in community, not being in church. But what she was doing was not church. What we're doing in our groups, when we settle in, when we open the Word, when we invite each other to answer the question, what is the Spirit of God doing in us? And what does it look like for us to obey that as individuals and then together? That's church. That shapes our world. And so, when I was thinking about her comments, I thought about you guys. I thought about our group leaders, leading groups, stepping in, being being on the front end of what the church is in our community and in our world. So thank you so much for that. Keep after it. Lean in humbly, but lean in with courage that God has you placed there to be a vital part of His church and what He's up to in the world. Be praying for your groups this week. Let me know if you have any questions. You're awesome. Take care.